Borderlands 3 is the highly anticipated sequel to Borderlands 2, the looter shooter that was Destiny before Destiny. The game is all about leveling characters, playing with builds, killing bosses, and of course, loot. Lots and lots of loot. So let's talk about it. The story of Borderlands 3 is not that great. It's really just serviceable. It's a story experience, but not a good one. Now, of course, comparing it to Borderlands 2, frankly, it was never going to be as good. Handsome Jack is one of the best villains ever written, and takes you for a ride throughout the whole entire story experience of Borderlands 2. So it was going to be a downgrade regardless. However, they really downgraded. Now, in my own opinion, it isn't really the story itself that's bad, but the writing. The writing is just cringe. They do some characters well. I thought Moxie and Hammerlock and a few others were good, but the majority, bro, I just don't want to hear anything that comes out of their mouths, especially these motherfuckers. These two are just terrible. I hate everything they say. It's just not good. And the jokes are bad. They, for the most part, just feel forced and unnatural. Pretty big step down from Borderlands 2's jokes. However, the saving grace is that the side quests, in general, are pretty funny. Basically just the main story jokes suck ass. Like I said before, I don't think the actual story events are bad. The stakes are actually higher than in Borderlands 2. But that being said, the ending was very deflating. It had me with the "that's it" kind of a feeling. Pretty underwhelming. The story also doesn't answer any of the questions the previous game asked, like why there can only be 6 sirens in existence, or what the war the Watcher in the pre-sequel was talking about. None of these are addressed. The Watcher isn't even in the game. I don't know, to me it's just feels kind of like a letdown, especially after what they set up with the Watcher. That's what I was looking most forward to. Another thing about this story is that major moments aren't treated with the respect it deserves. They're just kind of joked about and downplayed, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2 did not do that outside of Handsome Jack moments. It was mostly kept in with a serious tone and the jokes sprinkled throughout. One cool thing I did appreciate was that this game by far does the fantasy of a vault hunter the best out of all of the games. Potential spoiler warning, but it's not really a spoiler. You visit 4 vaults throughout the storyline of the game, and you actually go inside all 4 of them and loot them. By far the coolest, because you actually feel like a vault hunter going to different planets and looting the vaults, as opposed to the past 3 games where the game builds up to the vault and then it ends. Now this is where Borderlands 3 shines like a diamond. They did exactly what they needed to do. Take everything from Borderlands 2 and just make it even better. And better they did. Every character now has 3 abilities to choose from, on top of the 3 trees to choose passives from. And every character has a unique gimmick to them. Flack the Beastmaster can choose from 3 different pets to fight with them, each with varying playstyles. Zane, the Spec Ops character, can forego a grenade and have 2 abilities active. Mose, the Mech Gunner, can have 2 different guns active. And Amara, the Siren. It's a fucking siren. Her powers are cool as shit. There are also side passives that can further your playstyle preference. I personally have an SMG shooting monkey that can take a lot of damage when powered up. In fact, it can't die when it's powered up. And it reflects damage back, so this makes it a really good combat aggro taker while I deal the damage. However, if I decide I don't like the power-up ability anymore, then I can instead opt to go invisible, dealing big damage on invisibility end, similar to Zero from Borderlands 2. And finally, I could instead send racks, which are basically bats, flying at my target, dealing damage. Each tree has its own playstyle associated, and obviously you aren't just going to use one tree. If you're like me, you'll be using a lot of 2 trees. In fact, I think that's the only way you can do it. Another thing to note, you don't actually need to spec any of the passives to use the ability or pet in Flak's case. You can choose an ability and never even spec into the tree, doesn't matter. This is honestly exactly how skill trees needed to go, and I'm glad Gearbox had the vision to do it. Now the guns. The guns are really cool in this game. Almost every gun will now have an alt fire mode, which is exactly what it sounds like. So now you can have auto burst, multiple elemental effects like electric corrosive, etc, etc. The attention to detail is pretty nice too. For instance, on the assault rifles, when I select my alternate fire mode, there will actually be a selector, and it actually goes up and down. I like that a lot. On top of everything I mentioned, there is now extra movement options as well. To be specific, a climb, a slide, and a ground pound. These work really well for Borderlands gameplay. The climb is fun for exploration, as now you can go to greater heights and explore around the maps further. And the slide is fun in combat. I use it a lot as I'm a pretty aggressive close quarters type of player. Now the ground pound, honestly, I don't use it. I mean, they had a tutorial where they showed you how it works, but outside of that, I just don't use it. I don't know. It just seems not worth it. But that's okay. Now, what better to complement this improved gameplay than bosses to fight? The bosses of Borderlands 3 are a big improvement overall from the bosses of Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 was mostly just tank and spank, while Borderlands 3 has actual phases and mechanics alongside the tank and spank. One critique I will give of bosses though is that there is a lot of immunity phases. This isn't really an issue on bosses that are current, but when you go back to it on farm, it gets annoying because your damage will be completely halted and you have to just sit there and wait. If this wasn't present and replaced with an actual mechanic, or at least the immunity phase was lowered, I think bosses would feel even better to fight. Now, Borderlands 3 has actual endgame content outside of Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, in trials and a raid. Although in game it's called a takedown, but for the purpose of the review I'm going to call it a raid. Now first, trials. These are basically little time trials to see how quickly you can get through it. The faster you go, the higher the reward. These are pretty fun, but don't really become relevant once you put the raid on farm like I have. But they are fun, and I think on my next playthrough I'll opt to do these before I take on the raid. See, the thing is that the raid gear is a lot better than the trials gear. So I think the progression they wanted was you do trials and then the raid, but I said fuck that, I'm gonna put the raid on farm, and I guess I'm the clown for that. Who knows? Now, the raid. Honestly, I really like this. It's pretty much a 2-boss raid with a mini boss and trash to clear prior to the main encounter. I also want to mention that it is no pushover. The second boss, which is the real boss as far as I'm concerned, literally took me 5 days to kill. Now I have it on farm, but the feeling of getting further and further, encountering new phases and learning how to tackle them best, that was a lot of fun and is the main reason why I enjoy this kind of gameplay across all games of this genre, most notably for me, Destiny 2 and World of Warcraft. This boss, Wotan the Invincible, has 4 phases. The first 3 are basically variations of the same mechanic, with the final phase being chaotic at first. Takedowns are really good, and I look forward to the future of this content as it has been confirmed a new takedown will be coming in the future by Gearbox, and it won't be part of DLC, it'll be free. So co-op now has 2 rule sets, cooperation and co-opetition. Cooperation is brand new and basically means that everyone has their own loot. No one can take your loot. Coopetition, on the other hand, is the classic Borderlands rules. The same loot drops for everyone, so you can be a dick and take all the loot, or you guys can talk it out and see what's best for you, like civil people. Options are always a good thing, and I think this is a good change for people who would prefer to not have their loot stolen. Other than that, it's standard Borderlands, which means harder enemies. Also, the raid has a specific co-op mode which means more damage and more enemies. Same deal. Alright, so I'm making this its own category because this is pretty important. The game is not that polished, and this is the Steam release I'm reviewing it on. So they had 6 months since the actual launch of the game to polish it, and it is still not polished. My friends experience frame spikes. I have had several crashes.
And frankly I think it is so much freaking fun. But it's having some big problems just a day or two between performance and resolution mode, and people are reporting that in resolution mode, the game is dipping dangerously.
I give up. And experience some form of bug every single time I play. It's usually nothing major, just small little things. But now, several times in the raid, during the last phase, the boss would just glitch out at the beginning of the phase and basically make the fight a complete cakewalk. Pretty disappointing. I really wish the game could be as polished as, say, Doom Eternal, my source being my friend Lucas, because I haven't played the game yet. But sadly, it is not. And it's not the buggiest thing in the world, but bugs are very much present. Okay, 1. The menus are pretty bad. They don't flow as well as other games' menus, not even Borderlands 2's menus. However, the reason I don't rip this apart like I could is because once you actually learn how to navigate the menus, it isn't a big deal. But first, learning how to navigate the menus is annoying because the devs do not actually tell you how to do it. You need to figure it out. This is just stupid. For instance, I would get pop-ups about challenges I completed, but when I hold tab to see where the challenge tab is, it doesn't open the challenge tab. It just opens the map. In fact, the game literally doesn't tell you how to view challenges. I needed to look up an article to find out. Very smooth brain. 2. The music is good. I enjoy the 80s synth sounds it provides. 3. I really like how money and iridium are handled in this game. In Borderlands 2, iridium was used to upgrade your ammo and bag space, and money was pretty much useless. Well, not anymore. This time around, money is what you use to upgrade your ammo and bag space, and iridium is used for skins. It's a really, really good feeling to acquire vanity items for your characters by just playing the game and acquiring an in-game currency to spend, as opposed to loot boxes or even a cash shop. Just feels good, man. This change also does make money an actual resource to grind and save up, because like I said before, in Borderlands 2, it was pretty much useless. Now, useful. 4. The game has map objectives similar to Guild Wars 2, where it's just extra things to do besides just grinding. And they even have things for you to go back and collect once the main story is done in pretty much all of the zones. Overall, this is a really good thing, I feel. Borderlands 2 never had things to go back for, only things to look forward to. So this is a nice change. Now 5, level progression seems a bit too fast here. In the beginning, I would do all the side quests along with my main story missions, but at about halfway through the main story, every single side quest I got was trivial, meaning I would get very small amounts of XP for completing it. So I just stopped doing it, which is a shame because side quests are supposed to be the reason that you are ahead of the curve, instead of being something that gets outshined with standard story progress. Gearbox had one job: keep everything that Borderlands 2 did well and iterate on it. And frankly, they did exactly that. The gameplay is exactly what it needed to be and more. And with DLC content as well as free events on the roadmap, Borderlands 3 is going to be a game that keeps you playing. Not because you enjoy the grind like me, but also because there's just content to play. However, there is one area they did not do so well on: the writing and story. It was always going to be a downgrade, but did they really have to go this far down? It's just bad. But that doesn't make Borderlands 3 a bad game in the slightest. I give it an 8 out of 10 Borderlands 3 is a very fucking good game, and one I can happily recommend if you are into this type of gameplay.